What's up, guys? It's me, Roku, back with more League of Legends content, and in this video we got another banging tier list going for you guys. This was going to be for patch 12.5, which is going to last an entire month instead of just the usual 2 weeks, so it's important we know what's OP and what isn't. As for this specific video, I've added multiple tiers to the usual tier list formula that I've made. So I've separated overpowered and god tier because the god tier champions are overpowered even compared to the OP champions. I've split up C tier into those champions that could just hold the lane and champions that are really good but only for counter picks. And I've split up D tier into champions that are super niche or champions that exclusively will work in lower ranks like Iron, Bronze, Silver, and maybe low gold. Anyway, without further ado, let's just get right into it. I'm going to go alphabetically, left to right, starting off with Aatrox. Now, Aatrox is a pretty solid, strong, not overpowered, but just pretty good solo queue champion. He has decent matchups, he's playable into a lot of champions, and if you win the lane with him, you can really just destroy teamfights and solo carry them. He is a monster in teamfights, so if you understand how to lane with him, then you're going to be destroying games left and right. The only issue that I can see with Aatrox is that he does get destroyed by some of the more mobile, higher tier champions like Irelia just completely destroy him. So in such cases, playing Aatrox is like a death sentence, but you can use your bans and some clever play to kind of overcome those. So yeah, Aatrox is pretty strong. Akali. Akali is a very good situational pick in the top lane in that if you're playing into a champion where you don't really need to do much pre-6, then Akali is a wonderful champion because once you hit that level 6 power spike, she can basically solo kill most champions, and she's incredibly powerful in small skirmishes around the river and stuff, but just when she hits her ultimate. Without her ultimate, Akali is basically a sitting duck, so she's not that good in those kinds of crucial early game jungle invade plays. She just gets outclassed by a lot of the higher tier champions. Akshan. Akshan is still very much overpowered even with the nerfs to Hullbreaker. Obviously, he doesn't build it anymore, but I would say that he was overpowered even without that. Like the general playstyle of Akshan, where he kind of beats a lot of people in lane, but mostly just ignores top lane and just kills everyone around the map while still coming back to get some of that CS. That is why he is still an overpowered champion. Up next, we got Camille. Camille is still a very overpowered champion. I explained why she, is still overpowered in the last patch review, but TLDR, although she's still strong, because of the nerfs, she actually takes skill to play now. So she's hard to play, but still overpowered, and a great choice if you want to carry your games, because if you can get through the lane with Camille and get to your Sheen item, whether that be Triforce or Divine Sunder, you are straight up a monster. You one-shot people left and right, and she actually does stand a chance against some of these other big moving ones because her Q damage with a Sheen item is absolutely bonkers. Cho'Gath. I'd say Cho'Gath has taken some hits with the popularity of mobility and people moving around way better. Cho'Gath is kind of struggling in high elo. I have not seen many Cho'Gath players at all. I'd say he's a perfect champion to play in low ranks because players are kind of bad, but to play him in higher elo, you have to be really good at him. So he's a decent, good tank champion to play, and if you can land your abilities, he's quite powerful, but that's a big if, isn't it? Up next, we got Cassiopeia, which I should have done before the Cho'Gath. I'd say Cassiopeia is a decent counterpick champion. If you pick her into a character that's immobile like a Juggernaut, you will get a lot of work done. You will just destroy them, and in a lot of these cases, and if they do cheese kill you 1 or 2 times, you can still come back into the game because you just straight up counter them on a champion by champion base. So yeah, she's a great counterpick champion. You just got to pick those right matchups. Darius, our favorite boy over the top lane. He's a very strong champion. He's historically been an amazing solo queue champion. Once you learn how to get kills with him in lane, you can really just solo carry yourself out of low elo. In high elo, he's a very situational pick in that if you pick him like first pick, or you pick him into a team that has a lot of great peel, you're not going to be very effective at all. So yeah, he's an A tier pick. Great to have in your champion pool, but not so great to strike up one trick in high elo. Up next, we got Mundo. Mundo is one of the most powerful lane holders in the game. And by lane holder, I mean a champion who can just sit in lane, not die, and still be very powerful. Mundo has all the tools he needs to not just farm and function, but also follow up with any play that anybody makes around him. He's got pretty good range with his hatchet. He can follow up with CC with his hatchet and walk up, beef up, and tank a lot of damage while still dealing quite a decent amount of damage. So Mundo is very great. Fiora. Fiora is our first god tier champion. She has absolutely loved the bruiser item rework because it buffed a lot of her items, and Fiora can still abuse Hullbreaker. So she can basically abuse every single thing in the game that's overpowered. And keep in mind, if this was like before these updates and buffs and Hullbreaker, she was still a very powerful champion, but she's basically been taken to the entire next level with all these new things. So Fiora is absolutely overpowered. Gangplank. Gangplank is a very decent situational pick. I kind of struggle to put him any higher because he's not that great in low elo in my opinion. His early laning is also only good if you pick him into the right champions. There are some champions, especially the more powerful ones, that absolutely just destroy him, so you have to play him very carefully. In high elo, he's a very good lane holder in that he can just stay back, farm up, and be a monster carry, but it's just that, one, he can't really carry too much on his own, and two, he takes a lot of skill to play in terms of like not getting shredded in lane. So yeah, a decent situational pick that can be powerful if played right. Garen. Garen has actually been loving these new items. Well, not the bruiser items, but Garen's been loving Hullbreaker a lot. The whole Garen playstyle of just running around the map, just cheesing people out of vision, getting kills, and split pushing is very, very strong. If you get a lot of move speed on him, he's an amazing split pusher. Could just be all over the map and create a lot of problems for the enemy team to match him, right? Like, it's even difficult to match him even if you have teleport, okay? So yeah, Garen is an insanely powerful champion, especially in low elo, but he's playable right now in high elo, I would say, if you have the macro to support his gameplay. Up next, I'd say we have Gnar. Gnar is a decent lane holder champion in my opinion. Gnar has never really been a great solo queue champion because he kind of lacks the early game power to really win lanes and stop them. He's just a cheese range top laner who can stay safe. And even in his larger form, he still kind of like is not too like mobile enough to do anything in a 1v1 scenario, right? He's basically there to keep the lane like under control, to keep the lane calm, cool, and just outperform his enemy like top laner in team fights, which he can very well do. Like a big ultimate from him can absolutely turn around team fights, but he kind of needs a team to play around. So yeah, he's just a great champion at holding lane. Next, Gragas. I'd say Gragas is a very strong champion right now because he has insanely good matchups into all the popular champions. Gragas has always been a trading champion in top lane in that his trading power is absolutely insane and he has pretty good sustain after the first few levels. So Gragas is extremely hard to just put down in lane because he just outtrades you. And the reason why he's strong and not just situational or good is that he has great matchups into all of these high tier champions, right? So a Gragas properly played is an immensely powerful champion. Graves. Graves is another lane holder champion where, although he isn't as safe as the other lane holders, I'd say that he kind of scales up far better than them. Once you get your first few items as Graves and you just start critting people left and right, he's an insanely powerful team fighter and a solid source of damage for his team, right? But you just got to get to that point. The Hullbreaker nerfs kind of hurt Graves. He was one of the main users of Hullbreaker, so that kind of hit him quite hard, but I still think that if you play him intelligently with fleet footwork, just play safe, farm up, and then, get your items and one-shot people, he's a very, very strong lane holder. Gwen. I'd say that Gwen is mainly a good / situational pick. Like, she has one of the strongest level 6 power spikes in the game. She is kind of strong level 1 in terms of like just eat towards the enemy champion and all attack them to death. But I'd say she gets outclassed when it comes to a lot of the roams. She can't really keep up with many champions. And also I'd say that she's more so a high elo pick in that you kind of need your team to understand what you're capable of so they can play around you properly. Though Gwen is really powerful 1v1 level 6 and she's quite strong level 1, she still is like a scalar champion. Gwen is like a mid to late game scalar champion. She needs a lot of help to get going and really just start carrying the game. So unless your team understands this, you're not really going to be having the best of times. So she's better in higher elo rather than lower elo. Still a strong champion though. Illaoi. Illaoi is our first low elo only pick, and I hope this isn't shocking to anyone. Illaoi is rarely played in high elo by anybody because her champion itself just doesn't really fit with what's going on in the game whatsoever. She's great at just ulting and locking down an area, making it so that it's not really accessible to anybody else. But with a lot of these fights, it's all about mobility, just champions keeping up with each other and one-shotting each other. And a lot of the times, even if Illaoi does get a really sick ultimate, she just gets one-shot and destroyed anyways. So yeah, she's very situational, but she's amazing low elo where people don't really know how to play the game properly. Irelia, okay. I would say Irelia is basically an overpowered champion. Her Bork has really just, the Bork buffs have really increased her power by a lot because she's basically the best abuser of Bork in the entire game. Her extended all-attack range combined with the lethal tempo all-attack range makes her just go crazy with this item. So she's very much an overpowered champion. And, if you learn a bit of wave management and understand how to, land your E, she's actually quite easy to play in the lane. So if you want a champion to pick up and kind of carry games with, she's an excellent option because she also CSs on her own, right? The only issue is that her team fighting can get quite sketchy in that if you make one wrong move, you just get popped like that. But aside from that, she's a very nice overpowered pick. Heimer is basically just a counter pick. If you select him into a champion that he can just bully and take control of the lane with, then sure, he's great. But I wouldn't really think of him as like a super powerful champion because he's immobile. He needs to set his, turrets up before he can do that much things. And if he gets engaged on when he's not ready, he just gets destroyed instantly, right? He can't really do that much against champions who get on him and just kill him quickly before he can even set anything up, which is a lot of the champions, right? Heimer's turrets need like vision to attack champions. So when he's up against something like a Kiana or like a Kiana who can just have like a 6-second invisibility, he just gets destroyed. Yeah, and also landing the grenade on super mobile champions is not the easiest thing to do in the world. Janna. I'd say Janna is like a representative of all the flash, smite, support tops that just roam around and not even lane. So the nerfs they've done to her and also the bounty system have made it so that support tops are not really being played that much anymore. Now, I still think it's a viable strategy. Well, viable in that it's a disgusting strategy, but if you want to do it, you can still do it. It's just that you have to basically feed someone a lot before they can carry the game, okay? So if you have like a Gwen jungle or something and you can get a ton of kills on that Gwen, then it's kind of worth it. But if you don't have a dedicated big carry like a Jinx or something on your team who can basically overcome a fed top laner, then going support top is basically just trolling. Up next we have Jax. Jax, I'd say, is pretty much a decently strong champion because he does okay into a lot of these higher tier champions. He can be played basically into most of the top laners, and if you win lane with him, he's a monster. He can split push very, very well, and I basically explained all of this in the last tier of this video. He's a great rounded champion to pick up and play, a staple in any top laner's champion pool. Jayce is still overpowered. He has all the tools in his kit needed to create a big, beefy top laner. Once he gets out of lane and stacks up his man immune, he is just a monster in teamfight scenarios because he can literally just like poke people out of the fight completely with one like those lightning ball things. I don't know what they're called specifically, but the shocking lightning ball. He just sends one of those out to like the squishy Jinx, and now she's like, left on 200 HP, He's an insane champion in lane as well. He bullies a lot of champions and has every single tool he needs to be a monster. Jayce is just quite difficult to play, but when mastered, and you see this happen a lot in high elo Jayce players, like you can't really play the game against him. So he's a very, very strong champion. Karma, she just kind of falls under the same token as Janna. Kayle. I'd say Kayle is a decent situational pick who kind of falls under the same blanket as Gwen. She's not the worst in 1v1s. She's still a bit of a threat. If you go for like a Q-max kind of Kayle, you can, kite out melee top laners quite heavily. But your team just has to understand what you're made of and what your champion does for her to be really utilized properly. So in high elo teams, a Kayle pick, if you pick it into the right champion where, they don't just go around 1v9 in the game because you're farming in lane, then that's fine. But, I wouldn't really recommend her as a low elo pick, and I wouldn't really recommend her against champions like Akshan, who can really just, stomp the game on their own if you leave them unchecked. Who's next? Kennen. I'd say Kennen is a very nice counterpick champion. The issue with Kennen is just that he's like a later game team fighting champion. his early laning is not that powerful. All he does is just stay safe and poke someone out. His poke isn't even so powerful so that like you're being pushed out of lane. His poke is just mostly ignorable if your champion has decent sustain. It's just that like unless you pick him into a champion he can non-stop bully and not die against, he's not going to be that strong at all. Kled. I'd say Kled is a very nice, good situational pick. He's a wonderful low elo one trick, but it's just that like he doesn't have a lot of great matchups into the higher tier champions. Most of these high tier champions either completely beat him or have all the tools they need to beat him. So any person who can actually play like a Fiora or a Darius or something can just effectively isolate and destroy a Kled 1v1, or at the very least not feed him. A Kled that's not ahead is not really going to do too much because like with Kled, you really need that level lead so that your big buff HP base stat comes into play. And if you don't have that big lead, then he's not going to be doing too much in a more game setting, right? In a more outside of top lane setting, which is where he's strong, Okay, I'll put Lillia in there because people keep asking me, oh, where would you put Lillia at top? She's basically just a super niche pick. They can kind of counterpick some champions with, but like a lot of champions can just really destroy her because like a lot of these champions have either slows, things that can hold people in place, like just a ton of mobility, or they just outrange her. So yeah, she's not really the best champion to main or to just pick regularly. If you can find the right matchup to pick her against, then sure, but yeah, this is just to let all those curious people know that she's not that good. Let's see. I guess Malphite's next. I have to sort through all these champions and think about, is this a top laner? Is this a top laner? But yeah, Malphite. I'd say Malphite is a very nice counterpick if you counterpick it against champions like Jax or like a Tryndamere or something. In those cases, he's very, very powerful. But I'd say on his own, he's basically just there to exist. So he can be in either of these lane holder or counterpick categories, but I think he's very, very powerful as a counterpick because he does have some nasty matchups he can really just neutralize. Maokai, our first horrible champion. Now, when I make these tier lists, I try my best to do some research. So I make a version off of my knowledge. Then I go look at the data on UGG Analytics. Then I come back to my tier list. I'm like, hey, does this line up with the data? What can I adjust? Then I talk to my high-level friends. And in my search of data, I put Maokai here, and I could not even find a play rate on Maokai. He's like, nobody even plays him top lane anymore. So yeah, I would say Maokai is basically a very horrible champion. Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser is unfortunately only a low elo pick, where players don't really know how to dodge his things. Any sort of hypermobile champion is going to destroy him, by the way. He doesn't have the greatest of matchups because some of these champions just completely destroy him, even inside of his ultimate realm. But yeah, I wouldn't really recommend Mordekaiser being picked too much outside of low elo. Lucian. Lucian is a pretty decent counter pick. If you can, select him against a champion that you can kind of just avoid, he's a decent pick, but I wouldn't really rely on him as a range top laner too much because the amount of counters he can counter, the amount of champions he can counter aren't really that high. Like, if you want a solid anti-melee range ADC champion, then Vayne fits that role infinitely better than Lucian. But Lucian does carry better, I guess, in that he has ability-based damage too. He has more range, and with a more organized team, I guess he works fine. But if you're gonna pick Lucian, just play Vayne, honestly. Nasus, another low elo champion. Now, I actually played a bunch of Nasus in my Juggernauts 2 Diamond videos, I guess. And I mean, I got a better understanding of the champion, but I still think that he's only a low elo pick. He's just really weak earlier on, and because of how the game works, he's just not, he doesn't even scale up to be that much of a monster, unless you're just completely fed, okay? If the team has a solid backline Jinx or something, they will absolutely shred you, and you can't do anything against it, because Nasus, all he has are his Q and his W, okay? And not only does he get outranged by a lot of champions, he also just gets, CC down, stopped, and just eliminated from range, right? He doesn't have any AoE abilities like Darius or whatever to really just one-shot teams by himself. So Nasus is an exclusively low elo pick, and his early game weakness doesn't really help because in any jungle fight, invade, or even some specific ganks, he is completely worthless. So yeah. Let's see here. I guess I'll put Neeko in here too. Does anybody even play Neeko? I'd say Neeko is a super, super niche champion. She's more like a counter pick, but nobody even plays her. It's just that she's kind of immobile, so she is prone to getting abused. And the amount of champions she counters are smaller and smaller and smaller. And I don't really see her doing that well into some of these more powerful champions. So she's a super niche option that can sometimes be picked, but I wouldn't really recommend it at all. Nocturne. I'd put Nocturne in the super niche category in that he's just cheese, right? If you can pick him into a champion that you can cheese kill level 1 and stuff, he is quite strong in that, you can cheese kill top lane and then just perma roam, and his roams are quite powerful, but like a lot of the beefy bruisers just completely eat him up, and if he does lose lane, you're completely just griefing your team, because a Nocturne that's behind is not good at all. Olaf is just a horrible champion at this point. Nobody plays him, and with him, you gotta just get kills and get kills and get kills and kills, or you just become useless. And like he's just way too slow for the current state of the game. So yeah, poor Olaf. Ornn. Ornn is, I'd say, the most powerful tank champion in the game right now. His laning is insanely powerful. His trading ability is basically unparalleled when it comes to tanks. He has a lot of sustain because, remember, his shop is not just items, it also counts as sustain, because if he needs HP, he can buy a Ruby Crystal. If he needs mana, he can buy a Mana Crystal. He has sustain in his kit that is very easily accessible. So yeah, and Ornn is a team fighting monster. He can just clear out entire team fights and set up ganks by himself. So Ornn is an insanely powerful tank that's great if mastered. Pantheon. Pantheon actually is a very nice choice. Although he does get eaten up by a few of these champions, if you do understand how to play him properly and win lane, which you can with Pantheon, he is a very nice champion. A lot of people look at Pantheon and think he's some brainless champion, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Pantheon does take a lot of skill in terms of, which empower ability to use when, etc., matchups, and once you get fed on Pantheon, you can really carry the game on your own, because he really is a big brawler. He gets in, one-shots people, and just, cuts them around with his E. So, great champion. Spear Shot is not threatening me to put him at high tiers. That's a little joke, I guess. Renekton. I'd say Renekton is making a really nice comeback lately because of the Bork buffs. The Bork buffs have just improved this guy's spawn in the meta greatly, because a lot of the times when these champions get to their first items like Divine Sunder and stuff, they just completely turn the lane around and kill Renekton. But with the Renekton, as long as you can stay in lane until Bork, you basically auto-win 1v1s, because an empowered W into a champion with Borg is like more than half their health. Like, it's an insane amount of damage, and Renekton just loves this. Although I will comment that Renekton takes a lot of skill to play at this level. Most of the time, he's going to be a B-tier champion, but if you do have the skill to back it up in terms of matchups, then he's a very, very nice champion. Rengar. Rengar is a really nice, good situational champion. Lots of crazy matchups that he just absolutely dominates, and there's a lot of outplay potential with this champion, meaning that even if you are in a matchup that you're kind of supposed to lose against, you can still make him work off of your skill. Now, there is going to be an upcoming Rengar rework that they're doing they've announced it on Twitter, so I'm very curious to see how this plays out. If it is really interesting, I might pick him up and try it out myself, but for now, for his current state, he's a B-tier, good situational pick. Poppy. I'd say Poppy is a counterpick champion. Poppy basically works in terms of just, I wouldn't say that she's there to counterpick champions, but she's there to counterpick teams, if that makes sense. If you're up against some of these super dashy champions like your Kianas, your Akalis, your Rivens, then she can't get a lot of work done. But if you're not up against those champions, then Poppy is not the best character to pick up. Her laning is quite interesting in that she can get a lot of cheese kills. Her trading can be quite powerful, but unless you're making use of her dash stopping ability, I would really recommend it because she does get outclassed in a lot of ways. Gwen. I'd say Gwen is a very strong champion right now. She's basically just a worse version of Akshan. Akshan can roam from level 3, whereas Gwen has to wait until level 6. She is kind of better at roams in that she can get to fights faster, but because Akshan is invisible while roaming, it's more so like a gank, you know, it's more so like an unexpected play that you can make with him. When Akshan is out of top lane, he can be anywhere on the map, and his invisibility just supports his ability to do this. So yeah, Akshan is an insanely powerful top laner, but, you know, we're talking about Quinn here. Quinn, she's still strong because, you know, of her ability to just dominate a lot of these top laners and just leave lane and kill other people, then come back and collect the CS. She does also love the more powerful bulk, and yeah, let's see here. Riven. Riven is a god tier champion. Every single one of her items were just buffed by the bruiser item rework. She is just way too powerful and way too overpowered to even be fairly in this game. I guess every single season Riot wants Riven to be the best champion in the game for half the season, so fair enough, I guess. We're just in the league of Riven right now. Set. Okay. I'd say Set is a bit lower than A tier strong because he doesn't really see much play in high elo. Set is an amazing low elo pick, and if you pick him into the right, you know, counter matchups, into right matchups, or into the right teams that you can really just dominate, like pick up a tank and just ult it into their team and get a ton of damage out, then he's amazing. But that's why he's a situational pick. If you don't pick him into those matchups, he does kind of get easy to be kited, you know? In low elo, you could think of Set as this monster champion. You can crit people with his, like, inner W and get like 2k2 damage off, but like in high elo you can rarely get that W off on a backliner. You just can't pull that off because of how, you know, peel heavy teams are nowadays. So yeah, he doesn't really do that well in high ranks in my opinion, unless you pick him into the right team. Rise, let's just throw him in the trash here. Just get that out of the way. Shen is just a very overpowered champion, especially with the teleport nerfs. His ability to, you know, teleport to his teammates and save fights, save ganks, and just make plays on his own is really powerful. If you can get the early laning under control, it takes a bit of skill, then you can really just dominate the entire team off of playing Shen. Singed has his own weird playstyle where he just completely outruns people with Predator. He can just gank people left and right. He's a champion where he doesn't really lose too much off of losing CS, right? He can afford to just not farm and still be very powerful. And if you can proxy with him, you're just going to be so far ahead as him that even if you die after that point, it's kind of worth it for the amount of stuff that you picked up from proxying. So yeah, but he's a very niche champion, and I wouldn't really recommend too many people play Singed, honestly, because like I'd say he is a B tier, low B tier, or a high C tier champion at best. But because he's so unique, I'm just gonna put him in niche, and I wouldn't really recommend anybody else to touch him. Support, garbage bin. Sion. I'd say Sion's new split push playstyle is actually quite overpowered. It's just going to be it's just that these champions are so overpowered, they make him not seem overpowered, but Sion's, like, this split push playstyle with Sion makes him really strong. I'd say the most unfair part about Sion is that when you die as him, the respawn timer doesn't start on your death. I mean, it doesn't start on your zombie's death, it starts on your own death. So you can die, have your zombie form kill 2 waves of CS, and respawn immediately after the zombie dies, okay? So, like, his respawn timer is lower than every single other champion, and at the end of his respawn timer, he just spends a lot of time just CSing and getting all this health, because he just kills the minions, right? So yeah, this basically makes Sion very difficult to just push out of lane. Even if you kill him, you can't really recall, so he gets to lane faster and makes you lose minions or even gets to play it of his own. He can also abuse Hullbreaker and split push insanely hard. And with Sion, if you just get a bunch of minions killed, it doesn't even matter if you die, because the stats you gain from killing those minions is kind of worth it. He's a very annoying champion to beat and honestly just overpowered. You know what? I'll just put him in S tier. Why not? He's just straight up overpowered. But the split push playstyle, because he's one of the only champions here who can do that properly and like make it worth it to make it worth it to die. Okay, he can legally die, if that makes sense, and still become a late game powerhouse who just, you know, kills people in a side lane. Silas, he's just a counter pick against Malphite. I wouldn't really recommend him like any other way. I'll just put him in horrible tier. But yeah, he's only good against Malphite. Tahm Kench. I'd put Tahm Kench in a super niche category because he can be cheesed through some lanes, but the nerfs to him really destroyed his role in the top lane. Now he's overpowered in bot lane, but but yeah, he's not that strong in top lane anymore, so he's a niche pick. Teemo. I'd say Teemo is only a low elo pick at this point. After much discussion and thought, I've decided that he only functions as a low elo range top laner. Now, I don't want to make a controversial statement, but range top laners are not that easy to play in low elo. In low elo, range top laners are free food for most top laners. So I'd say that Teemo is very much an easy range top laner to play because of his blind and because of his extra move speed. So yeah, he's a low elo pick most of the time. And to play him at high elo, you really have to understand matchups and shroom placements really well. But I've mentioned this multiple times in the past. There are only a few Teemo players in the world who can do that properly. So, like, the overwhelming majority are just low elo Teemo players. So yeah, he's a low elo pick. Trundle. Interestingly enough, Trundle is making a comeback in terms of, like, you know, just getting into the meta. He has one of the most powerful level 1s in the game right now if you take Ignite and Lethal Tempo. And if you pick him into a team where you can do a lot of work with your pillar, he's going to be absolutely instrumental in winning the game. He can actually be one-tricked into, like, quite a decent elo. I do understand that there at some point, because he's still a juggernaut, he does get absolutely kited out to the next dimension. He's only good in a side lane if he's fighting a limited number of people. Whenever there's a lot of people involved, he just gets, you know, outclassed. But I mean, he's on the rise. He's a decent champion to play right now because of his sheer level 1 power and because of his incredible, not incredible, but because it, like, his pillar can be used to straight up counter some champions in the game. Tryndamere is another god tier champion. He is basically, if you want LP right now, play Tryndamere. He is very easy to play, and he has a massive margin of error because of his Q. Okay, his Q heals him for way too much, so even if you do beat Tryndamere in trades, he'll just heal all back up, and it won't even matter. Tryndamere is impossible to push out of lane. As long as there are minions for Tryndamere to auto-attack, he will remain in lane, which is something unique to him, right? Because he can do this from level 1. He doesn't need Vamp Scepter or anything. He can just stay in lane indefinitely, and it doesn't even have to worry about mana. Like, with Irelia, like, at some point, after queuing minions enough, she has to recall. Not Tryndamere. He can stay in lane and get poked out for as long as possible. So yeah, he is basically the most powerful champion in the game in top lane right now, I'd say, among these three. He has a massive margin of error and doesn't even take that much skill, unlike these two. So he is an amazing champion to pick up and to get LP with. Urgot. Now, Urgot is mostly a low elo pick, but I will admit that there are some games and situations where it can be a great pick in. I've seen that a lot. Like, I've been watching some high elo Urgot players play him, and I'm basically starting to recognize that, hey, this guy does fill out a purpose in a more organized team. Urgot is an amazing champion if you can play him into the right matchup and just get through lane, because after lane, Urgot acts as a pretty solid frontline, actually. He has decent peel in terms of flipping people over, and his ult works wonderfully well with his team. So if somebody goes in on your team or if somebody gets caught by your team, you ult, and then you can just flash in, fear everyone, and really set up a nasty team fight for your team. So yeah, Urgot is an exceptional champion that just takes some skill to get, like, the laning phase right. I'd say, like, having him in your champion pool for the right matchups is amazing, but I don't know about one-tricking him or maining him in high elo especially. Vayne. I talked about Vayne a bit when I was talking about Lucian, but yeah, Vayne is basically your, typical anti-bruiser top lane champion, top lane range champion. She is really good in terms of just 1v1ing. Her champion is hard-coded to beat some of these guys, but in my opinion, if you're picking Vayne, you should be looking at the entire enemy team rather than just your top lane, because if you pick Vayne into a team where she can just be plucked out and killed by some mage or something, then you're basically just signing a death warrant for your own team because they have a useless champion, you, on their team. But if you pick Vayne into a team she can just solo carry against, then you can basically just 1v9 the game even if you didn't win lane. So you better pick Vayne into teams she's good against rather than champions she's good against. So she goes into the counter pick category because if you're in the latter portion of the champion select where you see most of the enemy champions and you see, oh, I can just cut all these guys out and go for some Gosu plays with Vayne, then picking Vayne, if you can play her, can be a very devastating choice for the enemy team. Devastating for them. Good for you guys. So yeah. Great pick against some, but usually a bad pick, I'd say. Let's just toss this guy in the trash. Volibear is not a champion who's been enjoying the current season that much. He gets really outclassed, out-kited, just destroyed in many situations. So I would only recommend him into matchups where you can just get your stun off, get your lightning thing off, and just destroy them, okay? So he's a great champion if fed. He kind of works more like a Juggernaut than a tank in that if you get fed with him, you can absolutely get a lot of work done. His ultimate canceling, his turret canceling ultimate really makes some plays possible that just weren't possible before. So he's got a lot of creativity in how you can play him too. But it's just that his laning is very much dependent on champions. He's very much dependent on playing him into champions that he can just bully. If you play him into bad matchups, you are worthless, right? He's not a very generalist champion. Warwick. Warwick is basically just a cheese champion. He exists to win 1v1s in top lane if you can't win them otherwise. But one bad thing about Warwick is that even if he is fed, like as long as the enemy team has a proper core, you're just going to be worthless. The issue with Warwick is that although his 1v1 skills are really nice, he's not that great in a teamfight environment because 1, he doesn't even do that much damage. 2, he can be very much just destroyed by anti-heal. 3, he can't tank that much damage because his tanking mechanic is only high when he has his fear up. And lastly, his CC isn't even that good. You might say that, hey, he can go into a team and fear everyone, but the radius of that fear is very tiny. And every time he goes into an ult to suppress someone, he can very easily be knocked up by like a Janna, a Tornado, or just anybody else's CC and just taken out of the suppression, okay? Against a proactive team who knows what they're doing, Warwick is not useful in team fights at all. He's basically just good in small skirmishes against few people and against big team fights that are just stretched out, where you're basically fighting 5 1v1s rather than a 1v5, if that makes sense. You're picking the enemy team apart one by one. But any united team can make very short work over Warwick because he's not that good at anything. He's just meh at everything, if that makes sense. Let's see. Wukong. Wukong is a pretty strong champion, I'd say. He's loving most of the items. He's still an easy pick to pick up and to destroy games with. I'd just say that, he gets outclassed by the more overpowered champions in the game. That's where he struggles, in my opinion. So if you put him up against these guys, yeah, he sucks. But I would say Wukong is still very strong in lower ranks, in my opinion. But also in high elo, he has a lot of work he can get done if you pick him into the right matchup. On second, I'll put him in B tier, actually, because the if of picking him into the right matchup is so big that I'll put him in B tier instead of A tier, honestly. Yeah, he's B tier. His level 6 power spike is quite strong, but it's all about that matchup, so I'm going to put him in B tier instead of A tier. Now that I think of it. Jesus, this website, huh? Yasuo, super niche pick. Very doable, but I still don't think Yasuo top is recommendable to anybody. Unless you have thousands of hours on Yasuo already and want to play him top lane, I don't really see the point because I mentioned this in the last video, but to survive as Yasuo, you have to outplay people, okay? Let me repeat, not to win. You don't have to outplay people to win. You have to outplay people to survive, okay? So it's the skill difference between you and your opposing top laner has to be so massive for you to just roll them and destroy them. And if it isn't, if you can't constantly outplay them no matter what, then you are going to get destroyed. Yasuo cannot really put up the best of fights against a lot of these champions. Yone. I'd say Yone is a strong champion rather than overpowered nowadays. These champions just completely destroy him, and also he has taken a few hits from the nerfs and whatsoever. So yeah, Yone is here. And also some champions being able to rush Hullbreaker and just completely walk up to him and destroy him is a big factor in him being a tiny bit weaker. Yorick. Yorick is a pretty decent champion, I'd say, if you're picking him into the right composition or into the right team. If you are going to win the lane with him, he's an insane monster. But if you cannot guarantee a lane win, then he's not that great. And he doesn't really do that well into a lot of these champions. Tryndamere eats him up. A lot of these champions just completely make short work of him. And I don't really see him being that great of a pick in high elo. He's a great pick in low elo because players can't really, play against the fed Juggernaut down there. But in high elo, he gets destroyed by the powerful guys. a short note, not York related, but a lot of these champions are just in their spots because they're oppressed by how strong the top guys are, basically. Okay, is there any champion I forgot about? Oh, Vladimir. I forgot about Vladimir. I'll put Vladimir down here in the lane holders category because, like, Vladimir is just there to farm up and hold lane with. He can't really do too much on his own, and he really needs those first 2 items to really get into the game and start stomping fights with. But before then, he's basically just a cheese lane holder who can sometimes pick kills off on his enemy. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much it for this video. I really enjoyed making this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.